We've got some interesting videos to react to on today's podcast. I'll get the hair out of my face. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Detroit Lions star wide receiver, went on a podcast and was asked if you would rather face the Minnesota Vikings or Green Bay Packers in a playoff game. And his answer was a very interesting one. Take a listen or take a watch.
Who would you rather play in playoffs, Packers or Vikings?
Well, we haven't played the Vikings the second time yet. But I would probably say the Vikings. I mean, they're both, bro. Playing a division team in the playoffs it gets nutty. You don't know. You don't know what's gonna happen, but
Okay.
Now, people like Minnesota Vikings fans are really fans everywhere because Vikings fans are grouped into fans of every single sport. They're going to get offended by these comments and get a little salty and bitter. And if the Vikings beat the Lions in the final week of the season, we're going to go back to Amon-Ra St. Brown and say, well, would you still rather face the Vikings than the Packers in the playoffs? But I don't get offended at all about these comments because I think they're very accurate. When you think about the success in the playoffs recently, would you rather face the Packers or the Vikings? And I think the answer is very simple. Would you rather face the Green Bay Packers, who were a second half meltdown away from being in the NFC Championship game, or was it they lost to the 49ers, right? And was that to get to the Super Bowl? Because the Lions also blew it against why can't I remember this? The Lions also blew it in the game against the 49ers last year. So thinking about the playoffs, they lost to San Fran after they dominated the Cowboys. So yeah, that was them. They were a meltdown away from being in the NFC Championship game against the Detroit Lions last year. And you think about all the playoff success Sam Darnold has had, and it's been none whatsoever. And not saying that Sam Darnold can't have any playoff success this season, but if you are comparing quarterbacks and the experience and the experience from even coaches, Matt LaFleur versus Kevin O'Connell, you go Green Bay Packers across the board. So I think his comments make sense. Now, the Detroit Lions, look at their matchups this season, and they lost to the Packers have lost to the Lions both times. The Packers lost to the Lions just recently, 34-31 on Thursday Night Football. And then they lost to them in Week 9, 24-14. So the Detroit Lions have had the Packers number this year. So if that's, if you want to believe any of that stuff that, gets floated around, that the Detroit Lions beat the Packers twice, so you would think you'd rather face the Packers in the playoffs. And the Vikings did have a late lead on the Detroit Lions, and if they convert 1 3rd and 4, they're going to win that game because the Detroit Lions had no timeouts left. So really, the Vikings Lions game came down to the wire. But I understand why Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's not like it was an easy answer for him. It's not like, Packers easy. He had to think about it. He was hemming and hawing. And then he got to his point. And he'd rather face the Packers because of their experience, their success, and the quarterback play. Darnold's been better than Jordan Love this season. There's no question about that. But does that carry over to the playoffs? Because playoffs in every single sport are a different animal. You win or you go home. And when players have that mindset, the intensity is much more. And I think that first-time playoff experience is very valuable. And Darnold doesn't have any of that. because when you go to the playoffs in any sport, officiating changes. Officiating changes, meaning they let these players play so much more physical than they do during the regular season. And I personally don't like that. Like, I wish they let them play like they do in the playoffs throughout the regular season. And I get why they don't, because you'd probably have more injuries. You'd probably have more guys on IR. You'd be missing star players. But I love the physicality of playoff basketball, playoff football. So I wish that they let them play more similar to that than they do during the regular season. All right, next video to react to. Former Minnesota Vikings general manager Rick Spielman went on a show and shared his take on what the Vikings should do with Sam Darnold.
Who would you rather play in playoffs?
And potentially the Saints for Sam Darnold. Would you rather have Sam
Or the
Darnold?
Vikings. I would, if I was in Minnesota, why wouldn't you keep Sam Darnold?
What are you doing with JJ?
He's a rookie. He's going to start over from scratch. He didn't do anything this year. He's not practicing. He's sitting in meetings. He's rehabbing. He hasn't done one thing since that surgery except rehab, throw the ball on the side maybe, but he's not practicing. So you're starting from square one with him. Why not do a potential bridge deal like a Baker Mayfield, 3-year, $100 million deal?
How much?
You don't know.
3 year?
Maybe
How many?
he is. 100 mil.
Oh, okay. That's more reasonable. I didn't hear the number. Okay.
Yeah, you don't listen. That's what if someone that gives them a 3-year, $100 million deal?
Yeah. One other follow up to that. So, if JJ sits next year, because as you point out, basically his rookie season, you're okay just going 2 years on his rookie deal to see what you have in JJ?
Yeah, look at what Green Bay did with Jordan Love. Look what Green Bay did with Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre. There is, if you count next year as rookie year, Patrick Mahomes sat behind Alex Smith. So if I sit him for 2 years, why not?
He's not in the mood today.
The problem with Rick Spielman's comment, he said him for 2 years. Well, what are you going to do with the remaining 2 years of Sam Darnold's contract? I guess you could trade him, but you're not going to sit a $33 million quarterback behind a rookie in that third year. So there's some issues with the statement. I guess you could try to trade him, but second issue, Sam Darnold's not taking a 3-year, $100 million deal. He's not signing for $33 million a year. That is an unrealistic situation or scenario, because this is Sam Darnold's one time to shine. And it's funny to see people react to Rick Spielman's comments on X. Viking Central says, Rick Spielman loves to put teams in bad cap situations. It's true. I think you can make a perfectly compelling case to resign Sam Darnold, but the last person I want to hear make that case is Rick Spielman. That came from Gary Treeman. Will Parkinson. Rick Spielman spoke today on his podcast on CBS to discuss his role he'll play in the Jets' upcoming GM and head coaching hires. I guess that has nothing to do with it. But it was funny to see Vikings social media fans, content creators react. Here's another one from Ted Glover. This is precisely why Rick Spielman is no longer the Minnesota Vikings general manager. That goes against every single thing the Minnesota Vikings want to do. They want to create salary cap flexibility and allow the team to sign valuable players in free agency, especially after having the free agency year that they just had. Jake brought up a great point the other day. Greenard, Van Ginkel, Gilmore, Griffin, Cashman, those defensive players have been all very good on the Minnesota Vikings defense. And it brings up the question of, was this the best free agency class the Minnesota Vikings have ever brought in? Because as far as drafts go, the Minnesota Vikings organization has struggled in that category. But you look at what they did in free agency, and you think about the money that they're going to have this offseason to spend. Well, that's how they're going to build their roster and make it better. And to give Sam Darnold $33 million a year, well, you're going to be eliminating some valuable players that you can bring in via free agency if you do that. So Rick Spielman, I get his experience, but I also get that he's the Minnesota Vikings former general manager. And every general manager has strategy. His strategy was to bring in Kirk Cousins. And Kirk Cousins was a good quarterback for the Vikings. But it also went against Mike Zimmer's scheme of paying and bringing in defensive guys and having a defensive-minded team, and that's why they hated each other. Zimmer didn't want Cousins. Spielman wanted every general manager and head coach have their strategy. And the Vikings strategy right now is to create salary cap flexibility while having a rookie quarterback so that they can build a Super Bowl roster. So Vikings aren't doing what Rick Spielman did, and Sam Darnold is not going to do what Rick Spielman suggested. So those are my two takes. Thank you for going on this journey with me and for making this podcast a part of your day.